Today's video is brought to you by AG1. Even a few years ago, it seemed almost an impossibility that car dealerships would go the way of the dodo, but between Tesla and the economy, they may be going that way much faster than all of us think. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. If you're like probably 90% of the population of the US and I'm sure other countries, you enjoy going to a car dealership about as much as beating yourself in the head with a 2x4. And yet, until Tesla came along, it seemed like it was an inevitability that you would just have to go to a car dealership in order to get a car. It was the horrible experience that you had to endure in order to get a car that you wanted or needed. But of course, Tesla changed the entire landscape with that, allowing people to just go to a showroom rather than a dealership, where the people are there for your benefit rather than their own. They're there to show you a vehicle, to let you test drive it, and of course, to let you purchase the car from Tesla if you're so interested. But they have no personal motivation to do so. In fact, because they don't work for a commission, you're able to just walk in, look around, ask questions, and leave without any big problems. That doesn't happen at a dealership, believe me. And of course, as Misinformation and I found out again recently with our second Tesla purchase when we purchased the Model 3, and yes, there is a video on that coming soon. We just haven't had time to sit down together and actually film the last part of it. But as we rediscovered through this process, as well as our original purchase of the Model Y, we were easily able to go online, find the car that we wanted on the terms that we wanted, pay the $250 deposit, and then Tesla was amazing. They were able to work out the financing and all of the terms in less than 48 hours and even stayed open late for us to come pick up the car on a Saturday night. That's pretty amazing stuff on their part. So far from it being a stressful and terrible experience like the dealership experience generally is, this was actually quite the pleasurable experience, and it was actually really, really nice. And we very much appreciated Tesla Savannah and all the extra effort they put in to help us get the car as quickly as we were able to. And of course, as more and more people discover purchasing through a company like Tesla directly rather than through a dealership model, legacy auto manufacturers like Ford, GM, etc. are starting to wake up to the fact that they need to change their model as well. But the problem is that car dealerships have been far too powerful in the past. We'll take a look at what's changed in just a second, but first a word from AG1. You know, a lot of folks recently have been asking me how I get so much done. Well, I have a secret weapon that's not such a secret to the followers of this channel, AG1. I've been using it for nearly 3 months now, and believe me, it is a total game changer. AG1 has 75 vitamins, minerals, pre- and probiotics, adaptogens, and supports immunity, gut health, and gives me a ton of energy that I didn't have just a few months ago. Plus, it tastes delicious. Believe me, it has a nice hint of pineapple to it, and it's a good thing first thing in the morning after I get back from the gym. And for all you guys who are getting up there in years, believe me, it actually helps in the vigor department as well. Just ask Misinformation, she's noticed the difference, believe me. I can't speak highly enough of AG1 in my own life, but I'm not the only one. Recently, I asked if folks who had used AG1 on my recommendation had anything to say about it. Here are just a few of their comments. John, and by the way, good name, says, "Yup, addicted to AG juice." David says, "I used your site to enroll into AG1 in my second month taking the supplement every morning, and I ordered the fish oil too. I bought extra packets for when I go on vacation next month. It is what I needed, an extra boost to get me feeling better and working out again. I have more strength and mental clarity. Age 65 now. Thanks." And Greenspace says, AG1 has been a great experience for me too. Love it. And as David mentioned, if you use the link in the description, you get 5 travel packets so you never have to be without AG1, and a year's supply of vitamins D3 and K2. And it all comes with a 90-day guarantee so you can try it risk-free. If you want to unlock your full potential, AG1 is the way to go. What are you waiting for? So back to car dealerships. They had a point when they first began because auto companies were relatively small scale. They couldn't produce that many vehicles. And what they preferred to do if they sold them on their own was just sell them into big markets. And of course, they could charge whatever they wanted to. So the idea was basically to put in a sort of a middle person in between the dealership and the consumer, which number one allowed for more competition so that prices could come down for the consumer, but also allowed consumers in more rural areas to be able to have access to dealerships where the automaker might not really have an interest in selling vehicles into those markets. The problem that's accrued over time, of course, is that these dealerships have become very, very powerful, and they're actually taking a reasonable chunk of the profits that auto manufacturers are able to generate from manufacturing their vehicles. So basically, the auto manufacturer, they make a car, they charge, say, $50,000 for that car. They then sell it to the dealership. They do sell it to the dealership, and that's going to be very important in just a second. Anyway, they sell it to the dealership, and then the dealership is able to sell it for the MSRP. Maybe the MSRP is $60,000 for that vehicle, but the dealership can also charge a whole bunch of extra things. They can tack on extra fees, they can do market adjustments, they can do whatever. So by the time you walk out the door, instead of being $60,000, that car might actually be $70,000 that you've paid for it, even though the auto manufacturer believes that that car should actually be sold for $60,000. So the dealers are getting a lot of control over this. And of course, by buying through a dealership, the consumer is paying $70,000 for that vehicle rather than the suggested $60,000. So the auto manufacturer only gets, the $50,000 that they get out of that vehicle. And then the dealership gets that extra $10,000 to $20,000 out of that vehicle, which means, number one, that auto dealers can't cut prices as much as they want to because, of course, they have to have some margin in there for the dealer to make money. And second, they can't really pivot on pricing at all because what they can do, and Ford discovered this recently, was that they reduced the price of a lot of their more popular vehicles to try to sell them, but the dealerships themselves just tacked back on all of those extra fees through market adjustments and other things like that and caused the consumer to end up having to pay the same amount. So Ford made less because they sold it to the dealerships for less, but then the dealerships just tacked on the extra amount and they made even more. So dealerships have really become an albatross around legacy autos' necks. But there is a very serious matter afoot for auto dealerships, and not just new auto dealerships, but used ones as well. And that is that their credit is going to dry up, or actually is drying up right now. And that is going to have a huge effect and could actually kill a number of the dealerships. As Car Dealership Guy tweeted recently, this is big. Capital One is pulling inventory lines of credit, aka floor plans, on dealers. Basically, this means its dealers have 90 days to refinance their inventory. So what is a floor plan? As Brendan from Car Questions Answered has educated all of us about, a floor plan is basically the way that dealers purchase cars on credit. So if you think about it, if a dealer has 50 cars in their lot, just for a round number or something like that, they can't afford 50 cars worth of money. If each of those is $50,000, you're looking at $2.5 million they have to pay for that inventory. They can't afford to do that. So what they have to do instead is they have to finance that. And what they get is very, very good terms from companies like Capital One that allows them to keep the cars on their lots for 60 to 90 days, which is what's called a floor plan. And after that point, they have to start paying a significant amount of interest on those vehicles. But if they can sell those cars in less than the 60 to 90 days, they pay only a small fee for each of those vehicles. So it works out reasonably well for the bank under good conditions, and it works out great for the auto dealerships under good conditions because, of course, they don't have to front that amount of cash to purchase all those cars to have on the lot. The problem right now, of course, is that interest rates are starting to rise drastically, which has a huge knock-on effect for consumers' ability to purchase vehicles. And that then has a knock-on effect for dealerships and their inventory. So within their floor plans, they might not be able to get rid of those cars, and they're just sitting there for more than that 60 to 90 day window that they have before they have to start paying significant interest fees on that. And the problem with that is that these car dealerships can't afford to do that because, of course, then they have to charge more money for vehicles in order to make a reasonable profit on that vehicle. But if they can't get rid of those cars, what are they going to do? And that's what companies like Capital One are starting to look at. They're starting to say, wait a second, there's getting to be a bigger and bigger inventory on these car dealerships' lots, and we don't really want to be sitting there holding the bag, right? Because eventually, if that dealership, just say they had 50 cars on the lot and they went bankrupt at that point, that means that Capital One is on the hook for all of that money because they were the ones who fronted the money to the auto manufacturer in order for the car dealership to take delivery of these vehicles. So the bank is really the one that's on the hook for this whole thing. And of course, after the SVB bank collapse and Credit Suisse and a whole bunch of other ones, these banks are obviously becoming much more concerned about the possibility that they could be left on the hook for a number of car dealerships. And they are, like Capital One, beginning to pull the credit from these car dealerships. And what that means is that these car dealerships are now sitting on a time bomb. They have to get rid of these cars, or they have to refinance refinance the cars with another bank. And of course, those other banks are either not going to loan them money because they're going to say like the same thing Capital One is doing and saying, no way, we're going to touch this stuff. Or if it's a bank that's willing to take more risks, they're going to charge a lot more fees and a lot more interest right off the bat. So this is going to put the crunch on auto dealerships very, very quickly at the same time that they're having a really hard time selling to the consumer. And then if you add to that the pressure of companies like Tesla and Rivian and others that are able to sell direct to the consumer and therefore cut out that middleman extra fee and make the cars less expensive than they are to purchase from these other vehicles. Although, of course, there's no real comparison with a Tesla or actually a Rivian for that matter. But anyway, even if you did have perfect competition, there is no way that anything with a dealership model in between is going to be able to charge as little as what Tesla does. Now, they do have expenses with building out their showrooms and housing the cars and all of that kind of stuff. So yes, it does cost them something to sell to the consumer, but not nearly as much as what dealerships are doing. And then if you add on top of that the fact that consumers are generally, like I said, 80 or 90% of consumers are dissatisfied with the car dealership model and the experience that they have there, you're looking at a situation where car dealerships have really no leg to stand on except for legislative ones. And you can see car dealerships attempting to do this by trying to pass legislation to protect themselves in a lot of states, Mississippi being a recent one, that outlawed any kind of car showrooms without car dealerships in the state. So that's going to be a problem for Tesla. They'll have to sell in a neighboring state and people will have to drive back and forth. Texas famously does not allow people to purchase Teslas within the state. And that's a big pain because Texas is a huge state. So there's all sorts of problems with this, but getting squeezed from higher interest rates, more cars on their lots, banks pulling credit for them, and companies like Tesla and Rivian, etc., making the experience much better and less expensive for the consumer, we're looking at a squeeze on dealerships that could start putting them out of business really, really soon. And while I thought dealerships needed to go the way of the dodo, even I'm a little bit surprised about how fast this could happen. And if and when it does, there will not be that many people mourning at the dealership's gravesite. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon and my YouTube channel members. Thank you all so much for your support. I truly do appreciate it. And of course, if you want to join the team, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And finally, thanks again to AG1 for sponsoring this video. Definitely check out the link in the description and start feeling better soon. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.